with multiple sclerosis, and her father, Larry, is a small storekeeper. Victoria, in her age, at the disease and her distrust of Larry, attempts suicide when Ellie is 9 years old. It is Ellie's job each day when she comes home from school to count her mother's pills, to make certain that they are all there, and to check to see if her mother is alive. Ellie tells Mr. Dumont that the worst part of her day is when she comes home from school and must check on her mother's well-being. When he tells Ellie that she is smart and asks her what she wants to be, she tells him she would like to be a secretary. At 13, Ellie becomes pregnant and drops out of school. The situation is dysfunctional for Ellie because she must sublimate her needs to address the needs of her mother. In order for Ellie to have an appropriate developmental process emotionally, she needs to be a child, then an adolescent, then an adult. By being forced to take on an adult role earlier, she must, in essence, put her emotional development on hold while she functions in an adult role. Therefore, for the rest of her life, Ellie will seek to have her emotional needs met that were not met during her childhood. She almost certainly will not have the emotional resources and stamina necessary to function as an interdependent adult. Dependence, independence, interdependence. To become a fully functioning adult, one moves developmentally from being dependent to being independent to being interdependent. Stephen Covey calls it the maturity continuum. John Bradshaw refers to it as becoming whole, and Lev Vygotsky terms it the zone of proximal development. Regardless of the terminology, the process involving moving from being dependent on others to being able to work together with other adults, each independent of the other, but jointly as equal partners. Simply put, an individual operating in a dysfunctional situation is often forced to assume an adult role early, and then as an adult is literally caught between being dependent and independent. So one will see this fierce independence coupled with a crippling dependence that weakens the person to the point that he or she has few emotional resources. This roller coaster ride up and down between dependence and independence takes a heavy toll. Bradshaw and others describe this constant fluctuation between dependence and independence as codependency. As Ellie's case study illustrates, the emotional resources come in part from the role models who are present for the child. When appropriate role models are present, the child can go through the developmental stages at appropriate times and build emotional resources. Emotional resources are built in this fashion. The child watches the adult for emotional responses to a given situation and notes the continuum of behaviors that go with those responses. In Ellie's situation, her mother's response to her husband's infidelity was to create an even greater of dependence and to use the emotional ploy of guilt to manipulate Ellie. So what does Ellie do when she gets old enough? She creates a level of dependence on others as well, through pregnancy and going on welfare. A child may decide that the role model responses are not appropriate. Often what occurs then is that the child selects, in understandable reaction, the opposite extreme from which to operate. What becomes problematic for the child then is recognizing what is normal. An appropriate adult response is rarely seen as one of the options. The child, in essence, is forced to guess at what normal is or appropriate is. So why would emotional resources have such an importance in school and work?